Imani Brooks is 3 blocks from home when she spots the black SUV tilted at a sharp angle along the curb. The grocery store is about to close. Her father is waiting on medication she promised to pick up. Her little brother keeps texting, "You close?" Then she sees him, an elderly man in a tailored charcoal suit crouched beside the wheel, struggling with a jack positioned all wrong. One slip and the vehicle could slam down. Cars pass without slowing. No one makes eye contact. Imani hesitates. If she keeps walking, she makes it home in time. If she stops, everything at home waits. The spare tire is nearly flat. His polished watch catches the light, worth more than anything she owns. He looks up, pride swallowed. I can't get it to hold. Imani sets her bag down and steps forward anyway. What she's about to do won't just change his circumstances. It will change her entire future. But neither of them sees it coming. What she doesn't know is that this desperate old man isn't just stranded. And by tomorrow morning, 10 black SUVs will be parked outside her apartment because of this single choice. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The steady drip of water echoed through the small apartment as Imani Brooks carefully pressed clear packing tape over the cracked window. Her movements were deliberate and quiet, trying not to wake her family in the pre-dawn darkness. The leak had gotten worse over the last few rainy nights, and she couldn't bear watching her father get up to empty the catch bucket one more time. Harold Brooks dozed fitfully in his worn recliner, his breathing raspy and uneven. The lingering effects of his factory accident still haunted his lungs, making wet weather especially difficult. Imani paused in her work to adjust the thin blanket over his shoulders, her heart aching at how the damp air made his coughs deeper. On the sagging couch, her little brother Caleb was curled up tight, his math textbook still open on the floor where it had fallen. Imani picked it up, marking his place with an old receipt before setting it on the coffee table. He'd been staying up later, trying to help her study for her ASE certification exam when she got home from work. "You're up early again," Harold whispered, his eyes cracking open. "Just fixing the window, Daddy. Go back to sleep." Imani smoothed down the last piece of tape. "I'll pick up better plastic after work." "You should save that money for your test fees." He shifted, wincing as his bad leg protested. "The window can wait. The test can wait. You need to stay dry." Imani checked her phone. 5:15 a.m. Time to get moving if she was going to walk to work. She changed into her work uniform in their tiny bathroom, careful of the dripping ceiling corner. The red polo shirt with Mike's Tire and Auto emblazoned on the pocket was starting to fade, but it was still presentable. Imani pulled her hair back into a neat bun, checking her reflection critically. She had to look extra professional. Customers already doubted her enough just for being a woman in the shop. After a quick breakfast of dollar store oatmeal, Imani shouldered her backpack. It was heavy with her study materials and basic tools. She never knew when a neighbor might need help. She tucked her precious $23 deeper into her pocket, already planning how to stretch it at the grocery store's evening discount hour. The walk to work took nearly an hour, but every dollar saved on bus fare meant one more item in their cart. The streets were quiet this early, streetlights still glowing against the gray dawn. Imani kept a steady pace, mentally reviewing diagnostic procedures as she walked. Check for proper tire inflation first, then look for uneven wear patterns. The shop was already buzzing when she arrived, despite the early hour. Jake and Marcus, the other mechanics, barely looked up from their coffee as she clocked in. Imani didn't mind. She preferred getting straight to work anyway. Her first customer rolled in at 8 a.m., complaining about vibration at highway speeds. "I already had it looked at twice," the man said, glancing dubiously at Imani. "Maybe I should wait for one of the guys." "I can take a look," Imani said evenly, already hearing the telltale sounds from the front end. "Mind if I take it for a quick test drive?" Jake snickered from the next bay. Better let me handle this one, honey. Probably needs alignment work. Imani kept her voice steady. Actually, sir, I'm hearing what might be a failing CV joint. The vibration probably gets worse when you turn, right? The customer blinked in surprise. Yeah, it does. How did you… I can confirm with a test drive, but that distinctive clicking during turns is pretty clear. Imani maintained eye contact, professional and confident despite Jake's eye-rolling. 2 hours later, she was proved right. The CV joint was indeed failing, and the customer left with a properly diagnosed problem instead of another unnecessary alignment. Jake didn't apologize, but he did stop making comments, at least for the morning. During her lunch break, Imani sat in the break room with her worn ASE study guide, highlighting key points while eating a peanut butter sandwich. The testing fee felt impossibly far away, but she refused to give up. Every page brought her one step closer to her dream of opening her own shop someday. As her shift wound down, Mrs. Ramirez pulled into the lot in her ancient Corolla. The brakes were squealing badly enough to make everyone wince. "Imani, mihija," she called out. "I know you're almost done, but could you just look? I'm worried." "Of course, Mrs. Ramirez." Imani was already reaching for her tools, ignoring Marcus's pointed looks at the time clock. The brake pads were dangerously worn, but it was a quick fix with the parts Mrs. Ramirez had already bought. Imani worked efficiently, her hands sure and steady as she replaced the pads and checked the rotors. "Let me pay you something," Mrs. Ramirez insisted, holding out a $20 bill. Imani shook her head, wiping her hands on a shop rag. "No charge. Just keep bringing those amazing tamales to the building potluck." By 6:45 p.m., the sky had opened up completely. Rain pounded the pavement as Imani hurried toward home, one hand pressed protectively over her pocket, where the $23 waited. Her uniform was soaked within minutes, but she couldn't afford to wait out the storm. The grocery store's discount hour ended at 8 p.m., and she still had to pick up something for dinner. Water streamed down her face as she jogged through puddles, her work shoes thoroughly soaked. One more block to go, then she could cut through the side street and make it to the store. Thunder rumbled overhead as she approached the corner, unaware that her entire future waited just around the bend. Thunder cracked overhead as Imani rounded the corner, sending sheets of water cascading from overflowing gutters. Through the curtain of rain, she spotted an expensive black SUV pulled awkwardly against the curb, its hazard lights blinking weakly in the growing darkness. An elderly man in what had once been an immaculate suit struggled with a tire iron, his polished shoes sliding on the wet pavement. Imani's hand instinctively tightened around the $23 in her pocket. The grocery store's discount hour would end in 30 minutes. If she stopped now, she wouldn't make it in time. Caleb needed lunch for school tomorrow, and their kitchen cabinets were already bare. Cars splashed past, sending waves of dirty water onto the sidewalk. Not a single vehicle slowed. The old man's white hair was plastered to his forehead as he fought with the tire iron, his movements becoming increasingly frustrated. Imani took a step forward, then hesitated, her stomach twisted with indecision. The man probably had roadside assistance he could call. People like him always did. But something about his determined struggle, despite his obvious discomfort, tugged at her conscience. A passing truck sprayed water across the scene, and Imani watched the elderly man stumble backward, barely catching himself. That decided it. She couldn't walk away, not even for groceries. "Sir?" she called out, approaching carefully so as not to startle him. "Do you need some help?" He straightened up, water dripping from his tailored jacket. Despite his disheveled appearance, his eyes were sharp and alert. "I appear to be making rather a mess of this," he admitted, gesturing to the flat tire. "William Whitmore," he added, extending his hand. Imani shook it briefly, noting his firm grip. "I'm Imani Brooks." I work at Mike's Tire and Auto. She knelt to examine the situation, ignoring how the rain soaked through her already damp uniform pants. Your jack isn't positioned correctly. It could slip in these conditions. Without waiting for permission, she reached into her backpack and pulled out her own small jack. The metal was worn but reliable, like everything else she owned. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she positioned it properly under the frame. "You carry your own equipment?" Whitmore asked, watching her work. "Basic tools," Imani replied, focusing on getting the lug nuts loose. They were on too tight. Someone at the last service center had probably used an impact wrench without considering that the owner might need to change a tire manually. Always good to be prepared. The rain continued to pour as she worked, but Imani barely noticed. This was what she knew, what she was good at. Her movements were sure and practiced, even in the dim light and terrible weather. When she had the flat tire off, she examined the spare critically. "This is pretty underinflated," she observed, pulling her portable pump from her backpack. "You'd risk damaging it if you drove on it like this." "You're very thorough," Whitmore commented, holding his umbrella over her as she connected the pump. Imani shrugged, watching the pressure gauge. "No point in doing a job halfway." The pump hummed steadily as she brought the tire up to proper pressure. "But you should know. I noticed some uneven wear on your other tires. Your rear axle alignment is off." She mounted the spare tire, double-checking the lug nuts to ensure they were properly cross-tightened. Her fingers were getting numb from the cold rain, but she didn't rush. Every step mattered, especially in these conditions. "Where did you train?" Whitmore asked as she packed up her tools. "YouTube, mostly," Imani admitted, wiping her hands on her soaked uniform. "And watching. You pick things up if you pay attention." Whitmore studied her for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "Indeed you do." He reached into his jacket and produced a simple white business card. It contained only his name, no company information or contact details. "You have rare instincts, Miss Brooks." Imani accepted the card automatically, too aware of the time she'd lost to really process the compliment. The discount hour at the grocery store would be over now. She'd have to figure out how to stretch their food another day. "Thank you for stopping," Whitmore said formally. Not many would have, in this weather. "Anyone would have helped," Imani replied, though they both knew that wasn't true. The steady stream of passing cars had proved otherwise. She shouldered her backpack, now even heavier with wet tools, and turned to leave. The rain had finally begun to slack off, but it didn't matter much. She was soaked through. Her work shoes squished with every step as she walked away, leaving Whitmore standing beside his newly changed tire. The $23 felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket. Maybe if she hurried, she could still catch the store manager and explain why she was late. But she knew it was unlikely. Rules were rules, and the discount hour waited for no one. Still, as she picked up her pace, she couldn't bring herself to regret stopping. Some things were more important than money, even when you had almost none to spare. The morning sun had barely warmed the cracked concrete of the apartment complex when the deep rumble of multiple engines shattered the usual quiet. Imani was at the kitchen counter, spreading the last of their peanut butter on toast for Caleb's breakfast, when the sound made her pause. "What's that noise?" Caleb rushed to the window, his school backpack forgotten by the door. His eyes widened. "Whoa! Dad! Imani! You have to see this!" Harold Brooks shifted in his recliner, grimacing as his bad leg protested the movement. "What's going on out there?" Through their ground-floor window, they watched as a convoy of identical black SUVs rolled into the complex's courtyard, their polished surfaces gleaming in the morning light. One by one, they parked in a precise formation, taking up most of the available space. 1, 2, 3, Caleb counted excitedly. 10! There are 10 of them! Upstairs, neighbors emerged onto their balconies, cell phones raised to record the unusual sight. Mrs. Martinez from 2B leaned over her railing, her curlers still in her hair. The Rodriguez kids pressed their faces against their window screen, leaving smudged nose prints. "Maybe they're filming a movie," Caleb suggested, bouncing on his toes. Imani frowned, an uneasy feeling settling in her stomach. The vehicles were too nice for their neighborhood, their dark-tinted windows suggesting importance and money. The doors of several SUVs opened in unison. Men in crisp black suits stepped out, their shoes somehow spotless despite the puddles from last night's rain. They moved with practiced efficiency, scanning the surrounding buildings. A sharp knock at their door made them all jump. Harold struggled to rise from his recliner. "Imani, wait!" But she was already moving toward the door, her heart pounding. Through the peephole, she saw 3 suited figures standing in their narrow hallway. The woman in front held herself with unmistakable authority, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant twist. Imani opened the door, conscious of their apartment's shabby appearance. The water stains on the ceiling, the mismatched furniture, the duct tape holding together their ancient window air conditioner. "Miss Imani Brooks?" The silver-haired woman's voice was smooth and professional. "I'm Angela Reed, Chief of Staff to William Whitmore, founder and CEO of Whitmore Automotive Technologies." The name hit Imani like a physical force. The old man from last night, the one whose tire she'd changed in the rain, was William Whitmore? The billionaire whose company manufactured half the diagnostic equipment she dreamed of using someday? Harold moved to stand behind her, his cane tapping against the worn linoleum. "What's this about?" His voice carried the edge of someone who'd learned to expect bad news. "Mr. Whitmore would like to speak with your daughter immediately," Angela Reed explained, her expression warming slightly as she took in their concerned faces. "I assure you, this is good news. Miss Brooks did him a considerable service last evening." "The tire change?" Imani's voice came out, barely above a whisper. Angela nodded. "What you didn't know was that Mr. Whitmore was en route to sign the largest merger agreement in our company's history. The meeting was scheduled to accommodate executives flying in from 3 continents. If he had missed it..." She let the implications hang in the air. Caleb tugged at Imani's sleeve. "What's a merger?" "It means really big business stuff," she told him absently, her mind still trying to process what was happening. "A $3 billion business deal, to be precise," Angela added, "which might have fallen through if Mr. Whitmore hadn't made it to the signing." She gestured toward the door. "He's waiting to thank you personally." Harold's grip tightened on his cane. "Imani, you don't have to." "It's okay, Dad." She squeezed his arm reassuringly, though her own hands were shaking. "I'll just be right outside." Cameras flashed as Imani stepped out of the apartment, making her blink. News vans had somehow materialized alongside the SUVs, their satellite dishes reaching toward the morning sky. Neighbors she'd known for years watched from every available vantage point, whispering and pointing. The central SUV's door opened, and William Whitmore emerged. In the daylight, wearing a fresh suit and standing straight, he cut an impressive figure. But Imani could still see traces of the determined man who'd refused to give up on changing his own tire in the rain. He smiled warmly as he approached, extending his hand. "Miss Brooks, I believe we have more to discuss than axle alignment today." Behind her, she heard Caleb's excited whisper. "That's the guy? The one you helped?" "Yes," she managed to reply, shaking Whitmore's hand. Her own palm was calloused from years of mechanical work, but his grip was just as firm as it had been the night before. "Let's talk about your future," Whitmore said, gesturing toward the waiting SUV. Imani glanced back at her family. Harold stood in the doorway, worry etched on his face, despite Angela Reed's assurances. Caleb bounced beside him, all thoughts of school forgotten in the excitement. The morning sun caught the crack in their window, the plastic covering fluttering in the breeze. The distance between their apartment door and Whitmore's SUV was only a few yards, but, to Imani, it felt like standing on the edge of a vast change. Whatever happened next would be bigger than a simple act of kindness in the rain. She could feel it in the weight of the camera's attention, in the hushed anticipation of the gathered crowd, in the precise way Angela Reed held the vehicle's door open for her. The leather seat felt foreign beneath Imani as the SUV glided through downtown streets she usually walked. Buildings she'd only seen from ground level now passed at eye height through tinted windows. Angela Reed sat across from her, tapping efficiently on a tablet, while William Whitmore studied her with thoughtful eyes. "Tell me," Whitmore said, breaking the contemplative silence, "how did you learn to diagnose an axle issue just by watching a car pull over?" Imani's hands twisted in her lap. The way the tire wore on one side, plus the angle of the vehicle when it settled. She paused, then added, "I've been fixing cars since I was 12. You start to notice patterns. Self-taught?" When she nodded, Whitmore's eyes crinkled with approval. "So was I, at first. Did you know my first job was changing tires at a service station in Ohio?" Imani's eyes widened. "Really? Minimum wage, endless shifts, hands always covered in grease." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a long scar along his forearm. "Got this from a timing belt that snapped while I was leaning over the engine. But I loved every minute of it." The work felt honest. The city fell away outside as they merged onto the highway. Gleaming office towers rose in the distance. "The difference between you and me," Whitmore continued, "is that I had opportunities. A mentor who saw potential, scholarships, open doors." He leaned forward. "That's why I'm here. Not because you helped me last night, though I'm grateful, but because I recognize something in you that reminds me of myself at your age. Raw talent that just needs the right chance." Angela looked up from her tablet. "Mr. Whitmore has prepared a comprehensive proposal." "Not charity," Whitmore said quickly, noting Imani's expression. "An investment. In you, and in the future of automotive innovation." Angela handed Imani a leather portfolio. Inside, glossy brochures showed sprawling campuses and high-tech laboratories. "Midwestern Technical Institute," she explained. "One of the top engineering and automotive technology programs in the country. Full scholarship, including housing and materials." Imani's fingers trembled as she turned the pages. The yearly tuition listed made her dizzy. More money than her family saw in 3 years. "There's more," Whitmore said. "A paid internship in our innovation division during breaks. Real projects, real responsibility. And," he glanced at Angela, who produced another document. "Full medical coverage for your father," Angela said softly, "including specialized physical therapy and pain management. The best specialists in the state." Imani's throat tightened. She thought of her father, trying to hide his pain each morning, refusing to take pills because they couldn't afford refills. "Why?" she managed to ask. "Why all this?" Whitmore's expression grew serious. "Because talent isn't enough anymore. Because this industry needs fresh perspectives from people who understand real-world problems. And because," he smiled, "I believe you'll make me look very smart for finding you first." Angela began explaining technical details: enrollment deadlines, housing arrangements, insurance paperwork. The SUV turned onto a private drive leading to a towering glass building with the Whitmore logo. "This is our headquarters," Whitmore said, "where you'll intern. But first," he checked his watch, "I believe we have some documents for you to review with your family." The return journey felt surreal. Imani clutched the portfolio like a lifeline, her mind spinning with possibilities she'd never dared imagine. Angela reviewed key points: The scholarship required maintaining a 3.5 GPA. The internship included mentorship from senior engineers. The medical coverage would begin immediately. When they reached her apartment complex, the news vans had disappeared, but neighbors still watched from windows. Angela accompanied her inside, where Harold and Caleb waited anxiously. "Did you see their building?" Caleb bounced around them. "Was it huge? Did they have robots?" "Sit down, please," Angela said kindly. "We have some important things to discuss." At 7:30 that evening, Imani sat at their scratched kitchen table, staring at the stack of preliminary documents: scholarship acceptance forms, insurance paperwork, internship agreements. The pen felt heavy in her hand. "It's real," Harold whispered, more to himself than anyone. "It's really real." Caleb pressed against her side as she signed each page, his eyes wide with excitement. "You're going to build cars," he said. "Like, for real." "Design systems for them, hopefully," Imani corrected, her signature growing steadier with each document. Angela verified each signature, her efficiency softened by genuine warmth. "Congratulations, Miss Brooks. Welcome to Whitmore Automotive Technologies." Imani looked up at her father. A tear rolled down his weathered cheek as he gripped his cane. She hadn't seen him cry since Mom died. But these tears were different. Not grief, but something lighter, brighter. Caleb threw his arms around her neck. "You're gonna be famous." "I'm gonna work hard," she corrected him, hugging him back. "Really, really hard." "Like you always do," Harold said softly. Angela gathered the signed documents into her briefcase. Through the cracked window, the plastic covering stirred in the evening breeze. But for the first time, Imani didn't see it as a sign of what they couldn't fix. Instead, she saw it as the last reminder of the life they were leaving behind. A life where dreams stayed dreams and breaks never came. Hope had arrived at their door in a fleet of black SUVs, wearing suits and carrying contracts. But it had really begun the night before, with a simple choice to help a stranger in the rain. The gleaming glass tower of Whitmore Automotive Technologies stretched toward the morning sky like a crystal spear. Imani stood at its base, her worn backpack feeling out of place against the polished marble entrance. She smoothed her new blazer, purchased yesterday evening in a rushed trip to the department store, and took a deep breath. The revolving door whispered as she stepped into a soaring lobby. Water trickled down metallic walls, while screens displayed sleek vehicles gliding through city streets. Angela Reed waited by the security desk, clipboard in hand. "Good morning, Miss Brooks." Angela's smile was warm but professional. "Ready for your first day?" Imani nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't quite feel. The security guard handed her a temporary badge with her photo, taken yesterday during the whirlwind of paperwork. As they crossed the lobby, conversations hushed. Employees in tailored suits paused their morning routines to watch. Imani heard fragments of whispers. "Tire Girl," and "Whitmore's charity case." The elevator rode smoothly to the 42nd floor. Angela filled the silence with orientation details, building access protocols, cafeteria locations, IT setup. But Imani noticed how other passengers studied her reflection in the mirrored walls. The executive floor opened into an expanse of glass and steel. Workstations held floating screens displaying complex diagrams. Engineers huddled around holographic projections of engine components. "The Innovation Division," Angela explained, "where we shape the future of automotive technology." A tall man in a charcoal suit approached, his expression carved from granite. "Ah, our new intern." His tone made the word sound like an insult. "Victor Lang, Senior Engineering Director," Angela introduced. "Mr. Lang oversees all technical development." Lang's handshake was brief and cold. "I understand you have experience changing tires?" Heat crept up Imani's neck, but she met his gaze. and diagnosing transmission issues, rebuilding engines, and calibrating electronic systems. Really? Lang raised an eyebrow. Where did you receive your formal training? I'm self-taught. For now. Imani kept her voice steady. Starting at Midwestern Tech next semester. Lang's lip curled slightly. How fascinating. Tell me, what's the differential equation for modeling battery thermal dynamics in an electric vehicle? Before Imani could respond, William Whitmore's voice cut through the tension. The same equation she'll master at MTI, Victor. He approached from a corner office, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere. Along with everything else we'll teach her. Lang's expression smoothed into careful neutrality. Of course, sir. I merely wanted to assess our new intern's baseline knowledge. Assessment noted. Whitmore's tone was pleasant but firm. Now, shall we show Imani where she'll be working? They moved through the office to a section marked Electric Mobility Division. Screens displayed charging station networks and power distribution grids. A prototype charging port gleamed on a workbench. You'll observe here initially, Whitmore explained. Learn our systems, our processes. Angela will handle your orientation schedule. Throughout the morning, Imani absorbed everything she could. She studied technical drawings, watched engineering simulations, took careful notes. When the lunch hour arrived, she declined Angela's invitation to the executive dining room, choosing instead to review materials at her temporary desk. The afternoon brought more sideways glances and whispered comments. A group of junior engineers fell silent when she entered the break room. Someone had left a tire pressure gauge on her keyboard, a petty joke that she pocketed without reaction. At her desk, she dived deep into electric vehicle schematics. The basic principles felt familiar. Current flow wasn't so different from oil flow after all. She barely noticed the hours passing until Angela appeared with a gentle reminder about working hours. Most new interns don't stay this late, Angela noted, watching Imani organize her notes. Most new interns probably didn't grow up watching their dad struggle to walk after an industrial accident. Imani tucked her notebook away. I can't waste this chance. Angela's professional mask softened slightly. The scrutiny won't ease up, you know. If anything, it will intensify. I know. Imani stood, squaring her shoulders. But I've dealt with doubt before. At least here, I can prove it wrong. As she gathered her things, Whitmore emerged from his office. A word, Imani? In his office, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the sunset-painted city. Whitmore settled behind his desk, studying her thoughtfully. How was your first day? Educational, Imani answered carefully. And the welcome? About what I expected. Whitmore nodded slowly. Victor Lang is brilliant, but traditional. He believes talent only comes with degrees and pedigrees. He leaned forward. Do you know why I really offered you this opportunity? Because I helped you with the tire? Because you showed initiative without seeking reward? Because you diagnosed problems others missed? Because you have the one thing degrees can't teach: instinct. He stood, walking to the window. This company began with a mechanic's dream to make diagnostics accessible to everyone. Sometimes I worry we've forgotten that. He turned back to face her. There will be pressure to shrink yourself, to apologize for your presence. Don't. The words hit home, addressing fears Imani hadn't voiced. She thought of her father, who never let injury break his spirit. Of her mother, who taught her pride came from effort, not ease. I won't, sir. Good. Whitmore smiled. See you tomorrow, then. Imani left his office with her head high, ignoring the lingering stares from the few employees working late. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more doubts to overcome. But she had fought her way this far. She wasn't about to back down now. The elevator carried her down through the levels of glass and steel. past floors of people who questioned her belonging. Let them question. She knew exactly why she was here, and she intended to prove it. 2 weeks of observation had taught Imani the rhythms of Whitmore Automotive. She knew the security guard's morning greeting, the exact time the coffee machine finished brewing, and which elevator arrived fastest. But today felt different as she stepped into Conference Room A at precisely 8 a.m. Executives filed in wearing expressions ranging from polite disinterest to barely concealed skepticism. Victor Lang claimed a seat near the head of the table, spreading papers like a territorial marker. Angela Reed slipped in quietly, taking a corner position with her ever-present tablet. William Whitmore entered last, nodding to the assembled group. "Good morning, everyone. Today we're discussing new initiatives for community outreach and market expansion." He gestured to Imani. "Miss Brooks has a proposal I'd like you all to consider." Imani's hands trembled slightly as she connected her laptop to the room's display system. The screen lit up with her carefully prepared presentation. Mobile Diagnostic Solutions for Underserved Communities. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore." She took a deep breath, remembering her father's words this morning. "Just tell the truth like you see it." In the past 2 weeks, I've studied our market penetration data. There's a significant gap in diagnostic services for low-income neighborhoods. She advanced to a map showing service deserts in red. These areas have the highest concentration of older vehicles requiring maintenance, but the lowest access to certified mechanics or diagnostic equipment. Victor Lang's pen tapped against his notepad. "We're well aware of these demographics, Miss Brooks. They simply don't support profitable service centers, which is exactly why mobility is the solution." Imani clicked to the next slide, showing a converted van design. Mobile diagnostic units could serve multiple neighborhoods on rotation. Lower overhead than fixed locations, wider service reach, and direct community engagement. She displayed cost breakdowns and service projections. The vans would be equipped with our basic diagnostic suite, staffed by certified technicians. We'd offer sliding scale fees and payment plans. "Charity work," someone muttered from the back. "Investment," Imani corrected firmly. "These communities already spend money on repairs, often getting overcharged for misdiagnosed problems. We're not just offering services, we're building trust with future customers." The room stirred uncomfortably. Imani pushed forward, showing potential partnership opportunities with technical schools and community colleges. Many neighborhoods have skilled mechanics without formal certification. "We could offer training programs, creating a pipeline of qualified technicians who understand both our technology and their community's needs." Victor Lang leaned forward. "The liability issues alone are manageable," Angela interrupted smoothly. "Insurance models for mobile medical clinics could be adapted for our purposes." Whitmore studied the financial projections. "What's your timeline for a pilot program?" 3 months for initial setup," Imani replied. 1 van, 2 neighborhoods, 6 months of data collection. Total cost approximately $400,000, Lang cut in. For an unproven concept from an intern. The room temperature seemed to drop. Imani felt the weight of doubtful stares, but remembered Whitmore's words. "Don't shrink." "From someone who has lived in these communities," she corrected. "Someone who knows exactly what happens when people can't afford proper diagnostics. They skip maintenance, drive unsafe vehicles, lose jobs because of breakdowns." She met Lang's gaze. "How much does that cost society?" Whitmore's chair creaked as he leaned back. "Victor raises a fair point about risk, but innovation requires risk." He turned to the CFO. "Could we fund a pilot within current community outreach budgets?" Numbers were discussed. Questions raised. Imani answered each one, drawing on years of hands-on experience and 2 weeks of intensive corporate study. The meeting stretched past its scheduled hour. Finally, Whitmore raised his hand for quiet. I believe we have enough to consider. Angela, please work with Miss Brooks to refine the proposal for board review. We'll reconvene next week for a final decision. The room emptied slowly. Victor Lang lingered, gathering his papers. Ambitious plan, he said, voice neutral. Let's hope your technical skills match your presentation abilities. Imani spent the rest of the day fine-tuning details. She worked through lunch, comparing equipment costs and maintenance schedules. Angela brought her coffee at 4, suggesting revisions to the training program outline. The office slowly emptied as evening fell. Imani's desk lamp joined the city lights sparkling beyond the windows. She wrote emails to potential community partners, drafted certification requirements, calculated fuel costs, and service radii. At 9, the cleaning crew found her still working. At 10, security did their rounds, nodding at her dedicated presence. At 11, she finally packed up, sending Angela one last email with updated cost projections. The bus ride home was quiet, streets empty except for late-shift workers and delivery trucks. She found Caleb at the kitchen table, surrounded by homework he'd insisted on finishing while waiting up for her. Did they like your idea? He asked sleepily as she spread out her papers. We'll see. She ruffled his hair, noting the math problems he'd completed. They're thinking about it. You'll convince them, Caleb yawned. You always fix things. Imani opened her laptop one last time, reviewing the proposal that had consumed her every waking moment. Caleb's head slowly drooped until it rested on his textbook. The kitchen clock ticked toward midnight as she made final adjustments to the budget spreadsheet. Her brother's soft breathing mixed with the hum of the aging refrigerator. This could change everything, she whispered, saving the document one last time. 3 weeks of preparation had led to this moment. Imani stood before Whitmore Automotive's full board of directors, her presentation materials arranged with precision on the gleaming mahogany table. Afternoon sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the plush carpeting. William Whitmore sat at the head of the table, fingers steepled beneath his chin. 12 other board members, all in impeccable suits, watched her with varying degrees of interest. Angela Reed positioned herself near the door, tablet ready. Thank you for this opportunity, Imani began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The past weeks had been a blur of refinements, community surveys, and endless practice sessions. She'd memorized every number, anticipated every question. Our mobile diagnostic initiative addresses a critical market gap while embodying Whitmore Automotive's commitment to innovation and community development. She advanced through her slides with practiced ease, each movement deliberate and confident. The financial projections drew particular attention. Board member James Peterson leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. These operating costs seem optimistic. They're based on real-world data, Imani responded, pulling up detailed spreadsheets. I've partnered with 3 local repair shops to verify labor rates and parts pricing. We've also secured preliminary agreements for discounted diagnostic equipment through existing supplier relationships. Victor Lang shifted in his seat. And the liability concerns we discussed? Imani nodded, prepared for this question. We've consulted with Robertson and Mills, who specialize in mobile service operations. They've drafted comprehensive coverage options within our projected budget. She distributed bound legal summaries prepared by Angela's team. The presentation continued for 45 minutes. Imani addressed questions about staffing, security, and community reception. She shared letters of support from neighborhood associations and local business owners. Most importantly, she concluded, this pilot program creates a template for nationwide expansion. We're not just fixing cars, we're building trust, developing talent, and opening new markets. Whitmore surveyed the room. Comments before we vote? Peterson nodded slowly. It's ambitious, but the numbers make sense. Low initial investment, high potential return. The community engagement angle has merit, added Barbara Walsh, head of public relations. It positions us as industry leaders in accessibility. Victor Lang cleared his throat. While I maintain some reservations, Ms. Brooks has addressed the major concerns thoroughly. The vote was called. Hands raised one by one. When the final count was tallied, Angela's tablet chimed softly as she recorded the result. "Congratulations, Miss Brooks," Whitmore announced. "Your pilot program is approved. Initial funding will be released next week." The room burst into polite applause. Board members gathered their materials, several approaching to shake her hand. Barbara Walsh lingered to discuss press opportunities. "We'll announce this afternoon," Walsh explained. "The local success story angle is perfect. Young innovator gives back to her community. Would you be comfortable with some interviews?" Before Imani could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from the Midwestern Technical Institute. Her scholarship paperwork was finalized. She showed the message to Angela, who smiled warmly. "Perfect timing," Angela said. "Everything's falling into place." The next few hours passed in a whirlwind. She sat for photographs in front of the Whitmore logo, answered preliminary interview questions, and reviewed press release drafts. Her email filled with congratulatory messages from throughout the company. At 5 o'clock, she left the office to meet her father at his first advanced therapy session. The rehabilitation center was worlds away from their usual clinic, all modern equipment and attentive specialists. Harold Brooks sat straighter in his wheelchair, pride evident in his expression. "They say I might walk without the cane in 6 months," he told her, eyes bright with hope. "Proper therapy makes all the difference." The physical therapist worked with Harold for an hour, demonstrating exercises that would have been impossible without the new coverage. Imani watched, throat tight with emotion, as her father moved with growing confidence. Later that evening, back in their apartment, Caleb helped her scroll through news websites. Her story was everywhere. Rising innovator revolutionizes auto diagnostics. Whitmore Automotive launches community initiative. Local talent sparks industry innovation. "You're famous!" Caleb exclaimed, pointing at a particularly flattering photo. "Hardly," she laughed, but couldn't help feeling proud. Comments under the articles were largely positive, praising Whitmore's investment in community talent. Harold dozed in his recliner, therapy session papers clutched in his hand. The TV murmured softly in the background, local news celebrating a hometown success story. At 10 o'clock, Imani sat cross-legged on her bed, still reading coverage of the day's events. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from former classmates and neighbors. Even her old high school automotive teacher had emailed congratulations. The mobile diagnostic van designs filled her tablet screen, soon to become reality. She'd already started interviewing potential technicians from the neighborhood, planning training schedules, and scouting service locations. Everything felt right, like puzzle pieces clicking perfectly into place. The scholarship, her father's therapy, the pilot program, all the struggles and sacrifices were finally paying off. She scrolled through another positive headline, unaware that somewhere in the darker corners of the internet, trouble was brewing. A loud bang startled Imani awake. Caleb burst through her bedroom door, nearly tripping over a stack of mechanical manuals. His face was flushed, and his hands trembled as he thrust his phone toward her. "Sis, you need to see this," he said, voice cracking. "It's everywhere." Imani blinked sleep from her eyes, squinting at the bright screen. The video showed a rainy street corner, the footage grainy and dark. With growing horror, she recognized herself kneeling beside William Whitmore's SUV. But something was wrong. The clip had been edited, cutting between moments that painted a different story. It showed her walking past initially, then mysteriously returning. A timestamp appeared to skip forward, suggesting she'd waited for Whitmore to arrive. The audio was manipulated too, fragments of conversation rearranged to sound rehearsed. "Staged success story," blazed the headline above the video. The view count already topped 2 million. Imani's stomach lurched. "That's not what happened," she whispered, scrolling through comments that grew increasingly hostile. "Obvious setup. Another fake feel-good story. Bet Whitmore was in on it from the start." Her phone erupted with notifications. Messages from co-workers, texts from Angela, missed calls from reporters. A tweet from a prominent business journalist questioned the convenient timing of her rise at Whitmore Automotive. Harold appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily on his cane. "What's going on?" Before Imani could answer, her phone rang. Victor Lang's name flashed on the screen. She stepped into the hallway to take the call. "The board is extremely concerned," Victor said, without preamble. His voice carried barely concealed satisfaction. "This raises serious questions about your credibility." "It's not true," Imani protested. "The video's been edited. I can prove." "The damage is already done," Victor cut in. "Major sponsors are expressing doubts about the pilot program. They're worried about association with potential fraud." The call ended abruptly. Imani's hands shook as she opened her email. Subject lines jumped out like accusations. "Urgent. Program review required. Sponsorship status update. Press inquiry. Comment needed. Meeting cancelled. Further notice pending." Angela arrived at their apartment an hour later, her usual composed demeanor showing cracks of concern. She settled at their small kitchen table, spreading documents across the scratched surface. "We need to be strategic," Angela explained, tapping rapid notes on her tablet. "Legal is analyzing the original footage. PR is preparing statements. But we have to let the investigation process play out." "How long will that take?" Imani asked. "Days, maybe weeks." Angela's expression softened. "I believe you, Imani. But perception matters, especially with the board already divided on the program." Throughout the morning, the situation deteriorated. More news outlets picked up the story. Social media exploded with theories and accusations. Someone dug up Imani's old social media posts, twisting innocent comments into supposed evidence of premeditation. By noon, 3 major sponsors had officially paused their support. The pilot program's funding hung by a thread. Caleb tried searching for positive comments to show her, but they were drowning in a sea of skepticism. Harold watched helplessly from his recliner as his daughter's dream unraveled. "Maybe if I spoke to them," he offered. "Told them about who you really are." Imani managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Dad, but they're not interested in the truth right now." At 2 o'clock, Angela called again. Her voice was heavy. "The board has voted to suspend the pilot program pending a full review." "I'm so sorry, Imani." The words hit like physical blows. Suspended. Review. All her work, all the trust she'd built, crumbling because of a manipulated video. She thought of the neighborhood families who'd been counting on those mobile diagnostic vans, the young women she'd planned to train, the community that had finally dared to hope for something better. Evening settled over the apartment complex. The same neighbors who'd filmed those black SUVs with excitement now whispered behind closed doors. News vans circled the block, hoping for comment. Imani sat at the kitchen table, staring at her untouched dinner. Her phone lay silent. She'd turned it off hours ago. The laptop screen showed her carefully crafted presentations, now worthless. Somewhere in the city, board members were probably already planning to quietly shelve the entire initiative. Caleb placed a glass of water beside her, his young face tight with worry. Harold's therapy papers sat in a neat stack on the counter, tomorrow's appointment suddenly uncertain. The plastic still crinkled over the cracked window, a reminder of how quickly everything could return to the way it was before. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. Each second marked another moment of her dream slipping away. The scholarship, her father's treatment, the pilot program, all balanced on a knife's edge, because someone had decided to twist her simple act of kindness into something ugly. Imani touched the business card Whitmore had given her that rainy evening. Such a small thing to have changed her life so dramatically. And now, perhaps, to have ruined it just as completely. The Whitmore Automotive headquarters felt different that morning. Security guards who'd grown used to greeting Imani warmly now studied her with uncertain expressions. The elevator ride to the executive floor stretched endlessly as she stood alone, clutching her tablet like a shield. The emergency meeting was already in progress when Angela ushered her inside. Board members filled the massive conference room, their faces grim beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. William Whitmore sat at the head of the table, his usual commanding presence diminished by obvious fatigue. "Miss Brooks," Victor Lang spoke first, his tone clipped. "Perhaps you can explain how this situation has spiraled so dramatically out of control." Before Imani could respond, another board member, Elizabeth Palmer, cut in. "The real question is why proper vetting procedures weren't followed in the first place." She turned to Whitmore. "William, your heart was in the right place, but this impulsive decision has put the company at risk." Whitmore's fingers drummed against the polished table. "I trust my judgment of character," he said firmly, though his voice lacked its usual strength. "Imani Brooks has demonstrated nothing but integrity since a suspiciously perfect viral moment," Victor interrupted. "Our shareholders are demanding answers. Major partners are threatening to withdraw support not just from the pilot program, but from other initiatives." Angela slid a document toward Imani. "Given the circumstances, the board has recommended modifications to your arrangement with the company." Imani's hands trembled as she read. Her scholarship would become conditional on quarterly performance reviews. Any failing grade or misconduct would result in immediate termination. The Innovation Division internship would be suspended until the investigation concluded. Worst of all, her father's medical coverage was being temporarily frozen pending review. "We can't justify these expenditures without absolute certainty," Elizabeth explained, not unkindly. "You understand our position." Whitmore shifted in his chair, his face pale. "This is unnecessary. The girl changed a tire in the rain when no one else would stop. That's all that—" He pressed a hand to his chest, breathing suddenly labored. "William!" Angela rushed to his side. "Should I call an ambulance?" "Just indigestion." He waved her off, but his complexion had taken on an ashen quality. "Continue." Imani watched in horror as her mentor struggled. The man who'd given her a chance, who'd believed in her without question, was now suffering because of her. The weight of it all, the scandal, the suspicion, the strain on Whitmore's health, crashed down on her shoulders. "Mr. Whitmore," she said quietly, standing up, "I'd like to submit my resignation." The room fell silent. Even Victor looked surprised. "I won't let this company suffer because of me," Imani continued. "The pilot program was meant to help people, not create controversy. My presence is clearly becoming a liability." "Absolutely not!" Whitmore started to rise, then grimaced and sank back into his chair. "Please, sir," Imani pleaded, "at least let them check your heart. I'll still be here after." Angela was already on the phone with medical services. Board members exchanged concerned glances as Whitmore's breathing remained shallow. "Fine," he conceded finally, "but I'm not going to the hospital. Have them come here." The meeting dissolved into chaos as paramedics arrived. Imani slipped out during the commotion, unable to watch anymore. She gathered her few belongings from the small desk she'd been assigned, ignoring the whispers that followed her to the elevator. The day stretched endlessly. She received hourly updates from Angela about Whitmore's condition. Stable, but showing signs of stress-induced cardiac strain. He'd finally agreed to rest at home under medical supervision, but refused full hospitalization. Each message twisted the knife deeper. This was her fault. If she'd just walked past that tire that night, none of this would have happened. No scandal, no strain on Whitmore's health, no disappointed community counting on promises that might never materialize. Evening found her back in her old neighborhood. The apartment complex parking lot hadn't changed. Still cracked concrete and oil stains, still filled with cars that had seen better days. Mrs. Ramirez's Honda sat in its usual spot, the brakes she'd fixed still holding strong. 2 spaces over, Mr. Johnson's ancient Buick needed a new timing belt. She could hear it from here. Imani leaned against a lamppost, watching residents return from long workdays. These were her people, the ones who couldn't afford fancy garages, who kept ancient vehicles running through necessity and determination. She'd been one of them just weeks ago, fixing cars by streetlight because it was the right thing to do. A car backfired nearby, the sound echoing off brick walls. She could diagnose the problem just from the noise. Fouled spark plug, probably. Simple fix, if you knew what you were doing. That had been her world before black SUVs and glass towers, before viral videos and board meetings, before she'd dared to dream bigger than this crumbling parking lot. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across familiar ground. At 8 o'clock, the lot was full, a museum of automotive need. Every vehicle told a story of someone just trying to get by, just like she'd been, just like she might be again. The Saturday morning sun cast long shadows across the apartment complex parking lot as Imani unzipped her worn toolkit. She'd woken early, determination replacing the heaviness in her chest. The familiar weight of her socket wrench set felt right in her hands. No corporate logos, no fancy equipment, just the basic tools she'd collected over years of YouTube tutorials and practice. She popped open the hood of Mr. Johnson's Buick first. The timing belt looked even worse in daylight, frayed edges telling stories of thousands of miles. Imani tied her hair back, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. Word spread quickly through the complex. Mrs. Ramirez appeared first, smartphone in hand, recording without Imani noticing. "Look at this girl," she narrated quietly. "Every Saturday for 3 years, helping anyone who needs it. No money, no attention, just heart." The morning wore on. Imani replaced Mr. Johnson's timing belt, fixed Mrs. Peterson's stuck window regulator, and diagnosed a transmission issue for the Taylor family. Each repair came with patient explanation, teaching moments for anyone interested in learning. A small crowd gathered, neighbors sharing stories of times Imani had helped them before any cameras or corporate interests existed. "Remember when you fixed my alternator in that snowstorm?" Tom from Building C called out. He pulled up an old photo on his phone. Imani bundled up, hands greasy, working by flashlight in February darkness. "You wouldn't take a dime. Just ask me to help the next person who needed it." Sarah Martinez dug through her phone's gallery. "Here, this is from last Christmas." The image showed Imani teaching Sarah's teenage daughter basic maintenance. She spent 3 hours showing Katie how to change her oil. "Now my girl wants to be a mechanic too." Mrs. Ramirez kept filming, capturing the natural flow of community and kindness. No staged moments, no corporate oversight, just Imani doing what she'd always done. "This is who she really is," Mrs. Ramirez narrated. "Not some story for the news. Just a good person who never learned how to walk past someone in trouble." By early afternoon, the parking lot had transformed into an impromptu community garage. People brought folding chairs, shared water bottles, and swapped their own stories of Imani's help over the years. Someone set up a card table with sandwiches. Children watched wide-eyed as Imani explained basic engine components, their curiosity reminding her of her own early fascination with cars. The serpentine belt controls multiple systems, she told a wide-eyed 8-year-old girl, pointing carefully. See how it winds around like a snake? That's why it got its name. The child nodded seriously, committing the information to memory just as young Imani once had. More videos surfaced. The bus driver Imani had helped with a dead battery last winter. The elderly couple whose brake lines she'd repaired during a rainstorm. The single mom whose check engine light had caused panic until Imani diagnosed a loose gas cap. Each story came with dated photos, security camera footage, or witness accounts. A timeline of quiet kindness stretching back years before any viral moment. Mrs. Ramirez's original video began circulating online by mid-afternoon. Unlike the edited viral clip that had sparked the scandal, this footage showed the real Imani, focused, humble, generous, with both skill and time. Other neighbors posted their own recordings and photos. The real Imani started trending locally, then regionally. "My daughter would have lost her job without you," posted one neighbor, sharing a photo of Imani repairing a starter motor at midnight. "You kept her car running when no shop would take payments. 3 years ago, she taught my son basic car maintenance after his father passed," another commented. "Wouldn't take money. Said knowledge should be shared." The sun was setting when Imani finally closed her toolkit. Her hands were greasy, her back ached, but satisfaction filled her chest. She'd helped 11 vehicles today, taught basic maintenance to anyone who asked, and never once thought about cameras or corporate approval. This was who she'd always been. Grease-stained hands, and an inability to ignore someone in need. Her phone buzzed as she packed up her tools. Angela Reed's name lit up the screen. "The tide is turning," Angela said without preamble. "Your neighbors' videos are everywhere. Public sentiment is shifting fast. People are asking why a corporate board would punish someone for doing exactly what made us notice her in the first place." Imani looked around the parking lot. Mrs. Ramirez was still there, talking with other neighbors. Children played between parked cars while parents discussed future maintenance lessons. This was her real legacy, not glass towers or press releases, but a community where people looked after each other. "I'm not doing this for public sentiment," Imani replied quietly. "This is just who I am." "I know," Angela said. "That's exactly why it's working." As darkness settled over the complex, Imani closed her toolkit for the night. Her phone kept buzzing with notifications, but those could wait. Tomorrow would bring more cars, more learning opportunities, more chances to help, just like always. The 43rd floor boardroom gleamed with polished mahogany and floor-to-ceiling windows. Shareholders filled every leather chair, their expressions ranging from irritation to curiosity. Several checked their watches repeatedly, unused to emergency meetings disrupting their Monday schedules. William Whitmore stood at the head of the long table, his usual commanding presence softened by recent stress. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, but determination straightened his spine. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," he began, his voice steady. "Today, we're doing something unprecedented." The double doors opened. Mrs. Ramirez entered first, her gray hair neatly pinned back, wearing her Sunday dress. Behind her came Tom from Building C, Sarah Martinez, and her daughter Katie, Mr. Johnson with his repaired Buick's keys in hand, and a dozen other community members. They lined the walls of the boardroom, seemingly out of place among the expensive suits and tablets. Victor Lang, the senior engineer who'd first questioned Imani's credentials, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Mr. Whitmore, with all due respect—" "Respect," Whitmore interrupted quietly, "is exactly what we're here to discuss." He gestured to Mrs. Ramirez. "Please, tell them what you told me." Mrs. Ramirez stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly. 3 years ago, my husband died, she began, her voice wavering slightly. The car was all I had left of him, but it needed work I couldn't afford. Every shop turned me away. She straightened her shoulders. Imani fixed it. Spent 4 weekends teaching me basic maintenance, too. Said knowledge was better than dependence. Tom spoke next. My alternator died during the worst snowstorm last winter. 3 below zero, pitch dark. Called 6 shops. None would come out. Imani worked for 2 hours in that cold. Wouldn't take a penny. He pulled out his phone, showing the photo of Imani working by flashlight. That's character you can't fake. One by one, they stepped forward. The single mother whose car troubles nearly cost her job. The elderly couple who'd been quoted thousands for repairs, Imani fixed for free. Katie, Sarah's daughter, who now attended technical school because of Imani's mentoring. The shareholders' expressions began to shift. A woman in an expensive blazer wiped her eyes discreetly. 2 board members exchanged meaningful glances. These aren't publicity stunts, Mrs. Ramirez concluded firmly. This is who she is when no one's watching. When there's no reward except knowing someone else can get to work or take their kids to school. Whitmore nodded slowly. Now, he said, I'd like you to hear from Imani herself. Imani entered quietly, wearing simple business attire rather than designer labels. She carried no notes, no presentation materials, just herself, standing before the people who held her future in their manicured hands. First, she began, her voice clear and steady. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak, not to defend myself, but to explain something important about innovation. She paused, making eye contact with various board members. Real innovation doesn't start in boardrooms or laboratories. It starts where people are hurting, where they're struggling, where they need solutions but can't afford them. Victor Lang opened his mouth, but Whitmore's slight head shake silenced him. I learned mechanics because we couldn't afford repairs, Imani continued. I watched videos, practiced on junkers, made mistakes until I got it right. Not for profit or recognition, but because my neighbors needed help, and I could give it. She gestured to the community members lining the walls. These people taught me something you can't learn in business school. They taught me that innovation without integrity is hollow. Technical skill without compassion is waste. And profit without purpose is empty. The boardroom remained silent, every eye fixed on her. You're worried about company image, she acknowledged. About stock prices and quarterly reports. I understand that. But ask yourselves, what made this company great in the first place? She turned to Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore started as a mechanic who saw people struggling to afford diagnostics. He built this empire not just to make money, but to solve real problems for real people. Several of the older board members nodded slowly, remembering the company's origins. The mobile diagnostic program wasn't about publicity, Imani said softly. It was about remembering who we're supposed to serve. About reaching people who need us most. She straightened her shoulders. If that's not what this company wants anymore, then maybe I don't belong here after all. The silence deepened. A board member in his 60s cleared his throat. I move to reconsider our previous vote regarding the pilot program. Seconded? Said the woman in the blazer, her voice slightly husky. The chairman looked around the room. Those in favor? Hands began to rise, one by one, then in clusters. The silence grew heavy with possibility. The afternoon sun slanted through the boardroom windows, casting long shadows across the polished table. Board members shuffled papers and tapped on tablets, processing the last half-hour's events. Mrs. Ramirez and the other community members had been escorted to a comfortable waiting area, leaving the executives to handle the formal proceedings. The vote stands at 27 in favor, 3 abstaining, announced the board secretary, her voice precise and professional. Motion carries to reinstate the Brooks Community Mobility Initiative, effective immediately. Angela Reed, Whitmore's chief of staff, stepped forward with a tablet displaying detailed analytics. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she addressed the room. Our digital forensics team has completed their investigation of the viral video incident. She swiped through several screens. The edited footage originated from a competitor's marketing department. We have documentation proving the original encounter was entirely genuine. Victor Lang shifted in his seat, his expression uncomfortable. The senior engineer's earlier certainty had crumbled in the face of overwhelming evidence and testimony. He cleared his throat, straightening his tie. "Ms. Brooks," he said, looking directly at Imani, "I owe you an apology. My assumptions were incorrect and unprofessional." The words seemed to cost him, but his tone carried genuine regret. Imani nodded once, accepting the apology with quiet dignity. She hadn't moved from her spot near the head of the table, her posture remaining calm and collected despite the emotional weight of the past hour. William Whitmore rose slowly from his chair, commanding the room's attention without effort. "Today marks more than just the reinstatement of a single program," he began. "It represents a fundamental shift in our company's direction." He pressed a button, and the room's screens lit up with organizational charts and mission statements. "Effective immediately, we're creating the Community Mobility Division," Whitmore continued. "This won't be a small pilot program anymore. We're allocating substantial resources to revolutionize how we serve underserved communities." The screens filled with detailed plans, mobile diagnostic vans, neighborhood training centers, apprenticeship programs. Several board members leaned forward, interest piqued by the comprehensive strategy. "Our market research shows an untapped demand for accessible automotive services," Angela added, displaying revenue projections. "By combining social responsibility with innovation, we're not just doing good. We're expanding our market share in previously unreached sectors." The chairman nodded approvingly. "The numbers are compelling, and the positive PR potential is significant." "This goes beyond PR," Whitmore stated firmly. "We're returning to our company's founding principles, making automotive technology accessible to everyone, not just those who can afford premium services." He outlined the restructuring plans, new departments focused on community outreach, training programs for underserved youth, partnerships with technical schools. The mobile diagnostic vans would serve as rolling classrooms, bringing both services and education directly to neighborhoods in need. Victor Lang, perhaps seeking to rebuild his damaged reputation, raised his hand. "I'd like to volunteer my department's resources for the technical implementation," he offered. "Our diagnostic systems could be adapted for mobile deployment within weeks." The afternoon light shifted, warming the room as more details emerged. Budget allocations were discussed, timelines established, responsibilities assigned. What had started as a crisis meeting had transformed into an energetic planning session. "One final announcement," Whitmore said as the discussion wound down. "To ensure this initiative receives the attention it deserves, I'm establishing a new executive position, Director of Community Mobility Innovation." He paused, looking at Imani. "We'll discuss the details privately." The board secretary made final notes as members gathered their materials. The meeting had run long, but no one seemed to mind. There was an energy in the room, a sense of purpose restored. Even the most skeptical shareholders appeared satisfied with the new direction. Angela efficiently coordinated with various department heads, setting up follow-up meetings and action items. The massive boardroom slowly emptied, executives discussing possibilities in small groups as they departed. Victor lingered briefly by Imani's chair. "I look forward to working together," he said quietly, extending his hand. "Perhaps we can start fresh?" Imani shook his hand firmly. her response professional and measured. "I'd like that, Mr. Lang." As the last board members filed out, Whitmore gathered his papers unhurriedly. The late afternoon sun painted the city skyline in shades of gold and amber beyond the windows. He turned to Imani, his expression warming from professional to paternal. "Would you join me in my office?" he asked, gesturing toward the private elevator at the far end of the boardroom. "There are some matters we should discuss." Angela stepped forward to coordinate the logistics. "I'll ensure the community members are properly thanked and transported home," she said efficiently, "and I'll have the preliminary paperwork ready for your review within the hour." Imani gathered her simple notebook, the only item she'd brought to the meeting that had changed everything. The boardroom felt different now, less intimidating than it had just hours before. She'd found her voice here, spoken her truth. And somehow, that truth had transformed not just her future, but potentially thousands of others. Whitmore pressed the elevator call button, waiting patiently as Imani joined him. The doors opened with a soft chime, revealing the private car that would take them to his executive suite. The heavy mahogany door closed behind them with a gentle click. Whitmore's corner office spread out before them, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city bathed in late afternoon light. Unlike the stark modernism of the boardroom, this space felt lived in, with well-worn leather furniture and walls lined with automotive memorabilia. Whitmore gestured to a comfortable chair across from his desk. "Please, sit." He loosened his tie slightly as he settled into his own chair, the weight of the day evident in his movements. "Would you like some water?" "Yes, thank you," Imani replied, smoothing her skirt as she sat. She noticed a framed black-and-white photograph on his desk. A much younger Whitmore in coveralls, standing proudly next to an old pickup truck. He poured water from a crystal pitcher into 2 glasses. "That was my first restoration project," he said, following her gaze to the photograph. 1957 Chevy. "Everything I know about business, I learned from fixing that truck." He handed her a glass and settled back in his chair. "You kept working on it even when others said it was beyond saving?" Imani asked, recognizing the model. "Exactly," Whitmore smiled. "Just like you didn't give up when that axle alignment needed work in the rain." He paused, taking a sip of water. "Which brings us to why we're here." He pressed a button on his desk, and the windows gradually tinted, creating a more private atmosphere. The city lights began twinkling on in the growing dusk. "Imani, I'm stepping down as CEO of Whitmore Automotive Technologies," he stated simply. She nearly choked on her water. "Sir, I've been considering this move for some time," he continued, his voice steady. "This company needs new energy, fresh perspective. Someone who remembers why we started this journey in the first place, to help working families keep their vehicles running, to make technology accessible to everyone." He stood and walked to a wall of framed documents. "Do you know what these are?" Imani squinted at the certificates. "Patents?" "The original patents for our diagnostic systems," he confirmed. "But more importantly, they represent promises I made to myself when I started this company. Promises I fear we've drifted from in recent years." Returning to his desk, he opened a leather portfolio. "That's why I'm establishing the Brooks Community Mobility Initiative, with a $500 million endowment." Imani's hands tightened around her water glass. $500 million, yes, Whitmore finished. "And I want you to direct the apprenticeship programs, nationwide." The room seemed to spin slightly. Imani set her glass down carefully. "But I'm not even certified yet. You'll complete your certification, of course, but certificates don't teach what you already know. Genuine care for people, natural diagnostic instinct, and unwavering integrity." He leaned forward. "Which brings me to something else you should know." From his desk drawer, he pulled out a familiar-looking business card, identical to the one he'd given her in the rain. That night, when you helped me with the tire, I wasn't just testing fate. I intentionally drive an unmarked vehicle several times a month, park in various neighborhoods, and observe how people behave when they think no one important is watching. Understanding dawned on Imani's face. The merger meeting was scheduled for the following week, he confirmed with a slight smile. I've learned more about people's true character in broken-down vehicles than in any boardroom. Most people drove past. Some took photos. A few offered to call a service. But you? He shook his head in admiration. You stopped, knowing it would cost you personally. You showed expertise without arrogance. You treated me with dignity while refusing any reward. He stood again, walking to the window. The city stretched out below them, a maze of streets and lights, where countless stories like hers waited to unfold. The company needs that spirit again, he continued. Not just in one pilot program or one neighborhood, but across the country. We need to train a new generation of mechanics who understand that every broken-down car represents a family's mobility, a parent's job, a child's education. Imani absorbed his words, her mind racing with possibilities. The mobile diagnostic vans could be just the beginning, she said thoughtfully. We could partner with community colleges, create scholarship programs, set up apprenticeships in underserved areas. Exactly. Whitmore nodded approvingly. The endowment will fund infrastructure, but the vision, that needs to come from someone who understands the real impact of what we're doing. He returned to his desk and pressed another button. Angela entered promptly with a thick folder of documents. These are the preliminary papers establishing the initiative, she explained, setting them on the desk. The legal team will walk you through everything tomorrow. For now, you just need to know the broad strokes. Imani stared at the folder, her father's voice echoing in her memory. Sometimes the biggest blessings come disguised as broken-down cars. This is, she started. Overwhelming? Whitmore suggested kindly. It should be. We're not just talking about your success anymore. We're talking about changing the future of automotive service in this country. But remember, you've already proven you can handle pressure. You proved it that night in the rain, and every day since. Angela efficiently organized the papers into sections, explaining, we'll need to schedule meetings with the implementation team, facilities management, HR for staffing projections. Whitmore held up a hand, stopping her. Tomorrow, Angela. Let's give Ms. Brooks some time to process. The sun had fully set now, the city lights creating a glittering backdrop through the tinted windows. Imani sat quietly, her mind trying to grasp the magnitude of what was being offered, not just to her, but to countless others who would follow. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the freshly painted parking lot of the Brooks Community Training Center. Through the celebratory chatter of the ribbon-cutting crowd, Imani's trained ear caught the distinct sound of metal scraping against pavement. She turned to see a beat-up Honda Civic limping toward the curb, its front passenger tire completely flat. Behind the wheel, a teenage girl with braids pulled back into a neat ponytail gripped the steering wheel, her face tight with worry. The car came to a stop, and she stepped out, pulling nervously at the sleeve of her school uniform sweater. Imani excused herself from the group of reporters and made her way over. The girl was staring at her phone, probably searching for roadside assistance she couldn't afford. Imani recognized that look. She'd worn it herself not so long ago. Having some trouble? Imani asked, her voice warm and steady. The girl jumped slightly, then nodded. I hit a pothole, she admitted, shoulders slumping. My mom's going to kill me. She can't miss work to deal with this. I'm Imani, she said, already reaching for the mobile toolkit she still carried everywhere. Want to learn how to fix it yourself? The girl's eyes widened. I don't know anything about cars. Neither did I. Once upon a time, Imani said, kneeling beside the wheel. "What's your name?" "Destiny," the girl replied, cautiously kneeling next to her. Imani pulled out a jack and tire iron, laying them carefully on the pavement. "First rule of car repair: you're smarter than you think you are. These machines seem complicated, but they're just puzzles waiting to be solved." She guided Destiny's hands to the proper jack points under the car. "Feel that ridge? That's where the jack goes. Cars are designed to be fixed. They come with instructions built right into them, if you know where to look." The metal was cool against their fingers as they positioned the jack together. Destiny's movements became more confident with each turn of the handle. The car began to rise steadily. "My dad says girls shouldn't mess with cars," Destiny said quietly, watching the tire lift off the ground. Imani handed her the tire iron. "My dad taught me that everyone should know how to take care of themselves. Now, before we take these lug nuts off, we need to loosen them while the tire's still touching the ground. Know why?" Destiny shook her head. "Leverage," Imani explained. "The ground holds the wheel steady. Little details like that make all the difference." They worked together, Imani's instructions clear and patient. She showed Destiny how to brace herself for maximum torque, how to keep track of the lug nuts so none would roll away. The old tire came off smoothly, revealing a rusty spare in the trunk. "This spare's seen better days," Imani observed, checking the pressure with her gauge. "But we can make it work until you get a proper replacement. Always check the pressure. An underinflated spare can be dangerous." The crowd from the ribbon cutting had mostly dispersed. Through the training center's windows, Imani could see her father showing a group of young women around the diagnostic equipment. Caleb was at his computer station, probably already updating their database. But here in the parking lot, it was just two people and a car that needed fixing. "You're making this look easy," Destiny said, carefully threading the lug nuts back on. "That's because you're doing all the work," Imani replied with a smile. "I'm just talking." They lowered the car together, and Destiny tightened the lug nuts in the star pattern Imani demonstrated. Her movements were precise, methodical. There was pride in her eyes now, replacing the earlier anxiety. "There," Imani said, standing up and brushing off her knees. "How does it feel?" Destiny stood too, looking at her handiwork. Like I could do this again if I had to." "You absolutely could," Imani assured her. She pulled out a business card, simple but professional, with the training center's logo. "We offer free classes here every Saturday morning. Basic maintenance, tire repair, brake work, all of it. You should come." The girl took the card, running her thumb over the embossed letters. "Really? Really? First rule, remember? You're smarter than you think you are." Imani watched as Destiny carefully tucked the card into her phone case. "And Destiny? Tell your dad that girls can do anything they set their minds to." The Honda's engine turned over smoothly when Destiny started it. She waved through the window, a bright smile replacing her earlier worry. As the car pulled away, Imani noticed the grease on her hands, familiar, comfortable, like an old friend. The training center's sign cast a warm glow in the deepening afternoon light. "We fix what's broken," she whispered, feeling the truth of those words settle deep in her bones. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have hand-picked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.